alone in my sorrow and dead in my sin, lost without hope with no place to begin. Your love made a way, let mercy come in. When death was arrested, my life began. Ash was redeemed, only beauty remains. My orphan heart was given a name. The morning grew quiet, my feet rose to dance. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made us new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Released from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. Shame was a ransom he faithfully bore. He canceled my debt, called me his friend. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. A Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. Darkness rejoices though heaven had lost. Jesus rose with our freedom in hand. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. We're free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, forever, amen. When death was arrested, my life began. And we're free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, forever, amen. When death was arrested, my life began. When death was arrested, my life began. When death was arrested, my life began.
Stand, for the future they'll grow into, and so they know when to stand themselves. Stand, for those whom its promise always seems out of reach. Even when we're told we can be anything we want to be. Stand, for those that fought to bring us liberty, but can no longer stand on their own. Stand, so the wonder she holds in her hand doesn't fade. And the wonder she gives isn't taken for granted. Stand, because the freedom we desire was promised by the one who has no end to his authority. Because he stood for us all, and when he said, "It is finished," he meant forever. He meant for everyone. Stand firmly for the dream, for freedom. Even when standing means sitting, even when standing means kneeling, even when standing means praying, until all God's children are standing with you. Stand.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Eastside Online, and happy 4th of July weekend. We're so excited that you chose to join us today. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to like and share this page so that people all over the place have the opportunity to view our services this weekend as well. And I also want to encourage you throughout the service to feel free to drop a comment below or to the side, wherever it is on your screen, and chime in on what your thoughts are throughout the worship experience, throughout the service. We'd love to be able to interact with you that way. We have some exciting things coming up. We have our first point of Pathway that's going to be on July 7th at 6 o'clock. We've talked about it a little bit, but I want to encourage you to remember to sign up for it if you do plan to attend. So jump on our app, jump on the website, and make sure that you sign up for First Point of Pathway that's coming up this Tuesday night. We begin a new series today. It is Made for This, and Pastor Hastings is back to be able to share a powerful word with us this weekend. So if you want to go ahead and get any of your communion elements ready, your bread, your juice, whatever it is that you use, we will have a time of communion here coming up in the service as well. So without further ado, if you feel comfortable standing, sitting, whatever it is for you, let's jump into our worship experience.
You were the Word at the beginning, one with God the Lord Most High. Hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you are Christ. What a beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a beautiful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus. Didn't want heaven without us. Jesus, you brought heaven down. My sin was great, your love was great. What could separate us now? What a beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a beautiful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus. What a beautiful name it is. The
Just worship him right now, church. Just proclaim your glory.
Death could not hold you. Veil tore before you. You silenced the boast of sin and grave.
4th of July weekend, the overall theme that we hear this weekend is all about our freedom and our independence as a nation. But we also have to be reminded that as Christians, we also have freedom that is found within Christ. And in Galatians 5:1, the Bible tells us it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. So stand firm and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. So for us to have been set free, we had to have been burdened and held back and restrained by something. And so if you know anything about the Bible and the story that the Bible tells, it's that before we met Christ, before we had Jesus, we were a slave to sin. That sin in our lives, the bad things that we do, completely entangled us and just had a hold and a grip on us that would not let go. But because Jesus Christ went to the cross, and because he took the sin of the entire world upon himself and became sin, he died so that we could have that freedom. So that the sin that held us so closely and strangled every ounce of life from us would no longer have that grip on us. We are set free in Christ as believers in him. And that's why that we take communion. We remember the sacrifice, the blood that was shed, the body that was broken, so that a sinner like me, so that a sinner like you could have the opportunity to say that we are free, but it's only through Christ. So as we partake in the juice, as we partake in the bread, let us remember today that yes, we are free, we are independent as a nation, but more importantly than that, we are set free by the one who died on the cross for us. Father, I come before you right now and I just thank you. I thank you for enduring the cross, for all of the shame, every bad thing that the cross represents. I am so grateful that for us as believers, it represents freedom. And a symbol that looks so bad to others in that time, one of the most painful, excruciating deaths someone could experience, you took that upon yourself so that we today could call ourselves free through you and through you alone. Thank you for choosing to die on the cross for our forgiveness. We love you, and it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. Lord turn his face toward you and give God speak this favor over your life right now.
May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, their children, their children. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, their children, their children. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, your children, their children, their children. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, your children, their children, their children. May His presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you, within you. He is with you. He is with you in the morning and the evening, in your coming and your going, and your weeping, rejoicing. He is for you. 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 May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, your children, their children, their children. May His presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you, within you. He is with you. He is with you in the morning and the evening, and your coming and your going, your weeping and rejoicing. He is for you. 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 He is for
Are you on team mayo or ketchup?
Mayo for me.
Ketchup for me.
Mayo.
Ketchup.
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 Ketchup. Ketchup, for sure.
Ooh, probably ketchup.
Mayo. Or both? I don't know.
Ketchup.
Oh, ketchup.
Your ketchup.
Would you rather know the history of every object that you touch or be able to talk to animals?
Talk to animals.
Talk to animals.
Talk to animals, absolutely.
Talk to animals.
Well, talk to animals. Oh my gosh.
Talk to animals. Talk to animals. He doesn't know.
Talk to animals.
Talk to animals.
Talk to him.
Talk to animals, no doubt.
The history of everything I touch.
What is worship to you?
Worship is our way to glorify and give back to God.
Worship to me is giving back to God. He's been so generous with us, and basically it is just a time where I have time to let Him know how I feel about Him.
That's a good answer.
Show Him in another way that you truly love Him, that you're here because you want to be.
Good song. Worship to me is preparing my heart to come in to hear what God has to tell me. Yeah, worship to me is also spending time with God, whether it's in a group like a church or by myself in my chair, reading my Bible. And like Sandy said, serving others is one thing that we really enjoy doing as part of our worship.
Worship to me is glorifying Him.
Worship is just an intimate time between me and God, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's in my car or at church, just worshiping God in everything I do.
Worship to me is a moment where I can fully connect with my God with my terrible voice and all my odd hand movements and everything. No matter how bad it looks or sounds to everybody else, it sounds awesome to Him.
I just feel like it's such a wonderful time to be close to God. It just brings me to a level of intimacy with Him that I don't get at other times.
For me, it's just giving praise back to God.
Worship is just amazement that I got another chance to start over, to live forever, and to actually meet Him someday. That's worship to me.
How we doing, Eastside? Huh? Everybody doing good? All right. Good to have you. I want you to imagine with me, if we were to go back in time a little bit, an experiment that we're going to run real quick here. I want to pretend that we're going to take some famous people, and this is before they became famous, and we're going to take those people and we're going to try to force them into a field or an area that is different from that which they became famous for. And so it's kind of like the round peg fitting into a square hole. So we're going to go back in time and we're going to do that. Here's how we'll do it. Here's an example. We'll take Ludwig von Beethoven and we'll give him a shovel to dig ditches with. And Muhammad Ali will give him a wrench to fix some cars. And Billy Graham will give him a widget to assemble in the factory. And Oprah Winfrey, we're going to give her a stethoscope. And Bill Gates is going to give a pair of barber shears. And John Calipari, we're going to give some corn seeds to plant. And Denzel Washington, we're going to give him a sewing machine to make clothes. And we're going to watch all those people, and those are incredible people with brilliant minds, and they'll probably make a run at all those things. But listen, I don't know that they would excel. So let's kind of switch it around a little bit, and let's try kind of the round peg in the round hole thing, and let's see what happens here. So we give Beethoven a piano. And we give Ali a couple boxing gloves, and Billy Graham's going to get a Bible, and Oprah will give her a couch and some guests to talk to, and we'll give Gates a computer, and Calipari will get 5 superhuman athletes, and Denzel will give him a movie script. And now, all of a sudden, things have turned excellent because they found their purpose. Now, I want you to take that concept, and I want you to think of that in terms of God followers. I want you to kind of place it into that context, because God made us with very specific purposes. That when you and I were put on this earth, God had thought all about that. And He had figured, see, somebody agrees with me. He had figured out exactly why every person is going to be put on the earth. And the closer, watch this, the closer you get to that purpose in your life, the more excellent life is. But the more you drift away from that purpose, the farther you get away from that cause that God has given to each one of us, the more fuzzy life becomes. And so what I'd like to do with us is I'd like to talk to us about this idea of what we were made for and figuring out that. Rick Warren is sometimes called America's pastor. He's the lead pastor of Saddleback Church in Southern California, one of the largest churches in America. And Rick wrote a book about this about 20 years ago. And I don't think he was exaggerating when he wrote this. I want you to look at it. He said, nothing matters more than knowing God's purposes for your life. And nothing can compensate for not knowing them.
Not success, not wealth, not fame, not pleasure. And Solomon, the wisest man ever to live, whose writings are in our Bible, said the very same thing in Proverbs 11:28. He said, a life devoted to things is a dead life. It's a stump. But a God-shaped life is a flourishing tree. And so what I want us to do is I want us to jump on a journey for a few weeks here. I'd like us to spend the month of July talking about our purpose and what God made us for. And every week we're going to come in here and we're going to learn a different specific cause or purpose that God put together when he put us on this earth. And tonight we start with the idea of worship. That we are made to worship God. And I want to be pointed about this. I want to be blunt right out of the gate. I want you to hear this. No matter what a person ever does in their life, even if it appears successful, no matter what they choose to do, even if they rise high on the ladder, if they don't worship God, then they are dramatically less than what they could be. And so I hope that's one of the things that will resonate with you this evening when we talk about this concept of worship, is I want you to kind of catch this idea that the more that I bring that into my life, the more life gets good. And the less that I have in my life about that, then the more difficult life becomes. I saw it written like this. I want you to see this. Somewhere in the span of your lifetime, you have to figure out how to worship God, or the eulogy at your funeral will be average at best. You have to figure this out. And so we're going to jump in that today, and here's a great place to start when you're considering this concept of worship. The word worship in the English language, if you'd studied it, how we got the word worship, the heart of it, the core of it, is the word worth. And it actually was pronounced worth-ship. And so when you worship something, whatever it is, it meant that it was valued to you. You placed a worth on it. It meant something to you. It carried weight to you, whatever it was. And so tonight, as we talk about this concept of worship, what we're talking about is that God gets weight in your life, that he's worth something to you. He means something to you, that God has value to you in your life. Now, when you think about it in those terms and you open up the Bible, I didn't quite understand this to the degree that I did until this week when I studied it, is when the Bible talks about worship in the sense that God has weight in my life, God is valued in my life. It's not just one way that happens. There's not just one word in the Bible that says, this is how you worship, this is what worship is. I didn't realize this. There were 25 different words in the Old Testament and New Testament that talk about worship. And they all stem under this umbrella that God has value in my life. He means something to me. He carries a weight in my life. And when he does, then I express that in all kinds of different ways. Now, one of the ways that I display that worth of God in my life, that he's valuable to me, he's important, he carries weight in my life, is what we think of worship. And that's what we just did in this room. That you come to a building with your bunch of other people and you sing to God, and we call that worship. And that's true. That is one feature of worship. And I'll say this about it, that if God has worth in your life, that if God carries weight in your life, that if God is valued in your life, listen carefully, you will be here and you will worship. And if God doesn't have value, if other things carry more weight to you, then you may be here and you may not be here. And it's not any more complicated than that. And sometimes I think preachers kind of soft pedal that because we're afraid of hurting people's feelings. But there's one difference between people who gather with other people in a church to worship God and people who don't. There's only one difference. And the difference is the people here, God has value to them. He matters to them. He matters to them more than anything else. So when we think about worship, we tend to think of it in that frame of mind of what we just did. And we did that because God means a lot to us. But listen, that's a tiny, tiny aspect of worship in the Bible. That worship has all kinds of different expressions. And if we looked at everyone in the Bible, there's no way that we'd ever have enough time in a month to be able to look at those. I don't think you'd ever get caught up with that. Because under the umbrella of how do I show that God carries weight in my life? How do I do that? The Bible's just got gobs of examples of that. And so what I want to do tonight is I don't want to talk about what we just did when we call, gathering together in worship. I don't want to look at that angle of worship. I want to show you a couple in the Bible. I just kind of want to whet your appetite and show you a couple places in the Bible where it talks about this is how you express worship. And I kind of put it in kind of a simple way that we can all remember, easy to remember, because I want to talk about this, that if God is valued in my life, that if I have given him weight in my life, that if he has worth in my life, watch this, there's things that I will delete in my life. They won't be in my life because God has value. And then there's things I'm going to add in my life because he has value. And so I want to talk with this first one, that when God carries worth to me, that I will delete things in my life. There'll be things that aren't in my life because God is worth something to me. I'll give you an example of that. I talk a lot about the fact that I play golf, and that's kind of a big part of my life. And if you've ever played with me, you ever got paired up with me on a golf course, you know I hit as many bad shots as I do good shots, okay? I'm no good. I just have a lot of fun with it. And the stereotype of a golfer is if he hits bad shots that he gets mad. And or she gets mad. And I know we got some golfers in the room tonight. I know some of y'all play golf, and you know what I'm talking about. You hit a bad shot and you get mad. And sometimes you yell, and sometimes the stereotype is you might throw a club, you might break a club, you might do all kinds of insane things because you get mad at a bad shot. I was talking about that the other night with one of my kids and one of my boys, and we were talking about that and kind of laughing about that. Whenever you get mad at golf, you kind of do, yell or throw a club or something. And my wife, his mother, was listening in on the conversation. And she said, well, that's just ridiculous. If it causes you to throw a club, you got a problem. And my son said to his mother, well, obviously, you've never shanked an approach shot into the pond. And I'm glad he said that and not me. But getting back to this idea that you get angry at times, I got paired up one time with a guy that I never knew. And so we met each other, and we're playing golf along the way. And I must have hit some bad shots or something along the way, because he came to me and he said, hey, man, I noticed something about you. He said, when you hit a bad shot, you don't cuss. Why don't you cuss? If you've ever been on a golf course, you've heard words that you should not hear, because that's what a lot of golfers do. And I've been frustrated before. I get mad before. I've probably thrown a club before. I've done all that stuff. But there's one thing I've never done is I've never used profanity. I just don't use those words. I don't do them. And so this guy said, man, why aren't you cussing? You're so bad. Why don't you cuss? And I said, well, I'm going to tell you two things. I said, you don't know what's going on inside of me, okay? You don't know what's happening in here. Just pay attention, because when I spit, the grass dies immediately. So it's really going on in here. And then I said to him, dude, I follow God. I just don't talk like that. I just don't do that because I follow God. And what I was describing is that when God has value to you, that when God carries worth and weight, he means something to you, then there are things, there are behaviors that you just delete out of your life. I don't do that, and I don't do that, and I don't do that. Why don't you do those things? Everybody else does them. I don't do that because God carries weight to me. And the Bible talks about that being as a form of worship. Let me show you a verse in Romans chapter 12. It says, I urge you in view of God's mercy to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. What's a spiritual act of worship? Sacrifice. And the word sacrifice in the Old Testament meant to kill something. That's what it meant. That you would kill an animal as a sacrifice to God. And when it moved into the New Testament, what that concept of sacrifice meant was that I'm going to give up something. I'm going to get something out of my life. It's going to be done away with. I'm sacrificing it. I'm killing it. I'm getting rid of it. Why would you do that? Because he matters to me. That's why. And I want you to kind of wrestle with that this evening in my kind of silly golf analogy. I don't use profanity. That's deleted. It's sacrifice. It's not a part of my life because I live for God. But I want you to ask that of your own self tonight. Is there any kind of behavior, any kind of thing that maybe other people, you know, they are involved in that, but you say, man, I just don't do that. God means so much to me that I've placed that out of my life. And I can give you example after example after example tonight, but you're smart enough. I just want you to ask, have you done that? My good friend Dwayne Smith on our staff here at Eastside gave me a writing many years ago. He gave this to me from some guy who wrote this in the early 1900s. I don't know who the guy is, but he wrote this. I would just say it's a writing. Today it'd be a blog. It's one of those powerful things on sacrifice I've ever read. And the gist of it is that there might be all kinds of things that other people do. And you look around and say, well, they do that, and they're involved in that, and that's a part of their life. But when God takes full control of your life, you can't do those things. The title of that writing is Others May, but You Cannot. The opening sentence has haunted me from the first day that I've read it, and I've mentioned this in probably a dozen sermons in the last few years. Look at the opening sentence. In many ways, God will seem to let other good people do things which he will not let you do. So what is it for you? If I said, what have you deleted? What have you expelled out of your life? What have you said? Now, my neighbors do that, but I'm not going to do it. My friends do that, but I'm done with that now. What have you deleted because God carries that kind of value and weight in your life? That is worship. So that's just another angle of how the Bible describes what it means when God carries weight in your life. Now kind of flip that around. Let's talk about a secondary one, and that is when God carries worth to me, I will add things in my life. Now it's interesting, I learned this years ago in a chapel service where I went to college. And so I was 18, 19 years old and just a young kid. And where I went to college, it was a Bible college. And so you had to go to chapel 2 times every week. And so I think it was Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so chapel was just like a worship service right here. And you were required to go to it. And so over 4 years, I probably went to 200-300 chapel services, worship services, just like this. And I can tell you today, I hardly remember any of them. I hardly remember. The ones I remember, it's because college kids were being immature and doing goofy things. I remember we walked in chapel one time. It's honest truth. Walked in chapel. Somebody had broken into our chapel the night before, and it was a huge auditorium, probably 1,000, 1,500 seats in there. They were pews, and somebody had broken in, and they unbolted every one of those pews in the auditorium, and they picked it up and turned it around, faced it backwards, and rebolted it. It was the greatest thing I've ever seen in my my life. And so chapel got canceled that day, and we said, man, that guy is a hero. They never found out who did it. He had to work all night long. We were in chapel one time, and this guy's preaching. And most of the time in a Bible college, you got a professor preaching, and ain't nobody knows what he's talking about. He's so smart. And this guy's just going to town, and there was somebody who climbed up in the catwalk. This place was an enormous, cavernous building, and they had a great big lawn bag full of wet leaves, and they dropped it, and it landed right on the pulpit, right in the middle of the sermon. And the guy was a boss, man. He just swept it off and kept on preaching. Now we found out who that guy was. He got caught, and we sent him to the University of Kentucky. So he had to go there and get out of there. And I still remember that service. That's why every once in a while, you might see me when I come up to preach. I'll take a quick look up here. Okay, that's what I'm looking for, okay? I'm not saying God help me. I'm looking for what ornery college kids up there with a bag. My roommate one time got bored to death in chapel. He was sitting next to me, and I can't tell you his name because he watches these services online every once in a while. And he leaned over to me and he said, dude, this is awful. He said, I'm out of here. And he got down on the floor, and he did an army crawl all the way back under the pews so nobody would see him leave. That's what I remember about chapel. Aren't you proud of your preacher? Huh? That's what I remember. I think I only remember one message, only one. Only one do I remember. And it was a guy by the name of Bob Moorhead who used an analogy that shaped what I think about God today. He said, I want you to think of this, kids. We were kids back then. He said, you know how it is when somebody has a guest in their house going to spend the night? And so the host opens the house, and the guest comes in, and the host says, hey, come on, let me show you where you're going to stay, and takes them up the bedroom. This is where you'll stay. There's your bed and everything. Just, put your stuff there. And down the hall, that's the bathroom, man. There's the towels in there. And we go downstairs, and there's the kitchen, man. Grab you a drink or something. And most hosts will say this, and some of you have said this. If you're a host, you've said, just make yourself at home. You don't mean that. You don't mean that at all. Because if somebody told me to make myself at home, man, I'm checking out the cupboards. I'm looking in the drawers. I'm out in the garage checking out the tools. I'm going everywhere. You don't mean that at all. And Bob said, that's how we treat God. Because we accept the Father into our life and what Jesus did on the cross. Come on. And we say to the Father, just take over. Make yourself at home. And we don't mean that at all. What we mean is, God, there's some rooms in my life. I want you to come in and take over and be the Lord of those rooms. But I don't want you in that back room. I don't want you there. And we just start playing around with those kinds of things. And we said, Lord, you can have my Sunday mornings, okay? But God, I don't want you. I want you to stay out of Tuesday evenings when I'm out with my buddies. And Lord, you can work in my kids' lives. I want you to go crazy with my kids and work on them. But God, I want you to leave my bad attitude at work alone. And you can do work with my friends. That's great, man. Give me some good friends. Let's work on that. But I don't need you getting down into my checkbook. And we say, just make yourself at home. And God says, you don't mean that. You don't mean that at all. When the Bible talks about worship, this other facet of worship, it brings to this idea that you add things that God can control. That you add rooms that he can take over. And the Bible on a number of occasions brings this idea up that if you worship God, if he has value in your life, if he means something, you're always asking, is there a room I've kept him out? I need to add that in here. You're always asking that. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31. It says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Colossians chapter 3, verse 17. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. And you notice in both of those scriptures, you have that phrase, whatever you do. Whatever you do. Whatever you do means whatever you do. You say, well, Dave, that sounds just kind of broad. It's too wide. It's because it's intended to be that way. Whatever you do, everything you do, that God ought to have a role in it. Our home is probably a lot like your home. We get together after work and we come in the house and somebody might say, so what'd you do today? And so you just start kind of explaining. Well, I had some meetings with the grocery store, FaceTime one of the kids, got the oil change in the car, grabbed some coffee with a friend, paid some bills. That's whatever you do. Whatever you do. Think of it this way. What are you going to be doing tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock? Think about it right now. Don't say it. Just think about it right now. Where are you going to be? What are you going to do? That's whatever you do. Where are you going to be tomorrow night? 7 p.m. What are you going to be doing? Where are you going to be? Who are you going to be with? That's whatever you do. And the Bible teaches that when God means something in your life, that when God has value, you are constantly adding rooms that he can take control over. And so you got to deal with that if you really want to worship. See, again, we think worship is this, okay? This is easy. This is easy. You got a problem with this? You ain't on first base yet. Try this. Whatever you do, whatever area of your life, there's been a padlock and God hadn't been able to get in. Well, worship is to say, you mean so much, I'm going to add that in. So just ask yourself right now, what closet in your life have you told him to this point to stay out of? And worship is to knock the padlock off and allow God to reign in whatever you do. So when God means something to me, when he carries weight to me, yeah, I'll show up in church and I'll sing with other Christians and learn the word. Of course I'll do that, but that's not all I'll do. If he really means something to me, man, I'm deleting stuff all the time. I'm adding stuff all the time. Why? Because he carries weight to me. There's a guy by the name of Philip Yancey, Yancey, a great, well-known Christian author. You ever see a book by Yancey, buy it. If you can't afford it, charge it. John Talbot will give you the money to pay for it. Philip Yancey, an incredible Christian author. One of his books, he told about a trip he and his wife took out to Yellowstone National Park, and they wanted to see the geyser Old Faithful. And so he wrote about it in a chapter in this book. Now, I've never been out there. I've read about it, and I've studied a little bit about the Old Faithful geyser, and he pictures it in a beautiful way. He said that thing erupts every 24 minutes on the dot. That's why they're called Old Faithful. And there's a restaurant not far from the geyser, and a lot of the tourists will have lunch there or dinner or breakfast, things like that. And on the side of the restaurant where the geyser is, it's all glass. The whole thing is just this beautiful glass. And they got this giant clock in there that counts down to 24 minutes. And Yancey said that he noticed that when the number was getting close to 24, that everybody eating in the restaurant would get up from their tables and they would all go over to the glass and they would watch the eruption with oohs and ahs. And when it was over, they would go back to their seats. Every 24 minutes, he said that happened. He said one of the times when it erupted, he and his wife were by the glass, they were looking at it, and he said, I happened to turn around and noticed that not a single waiter or busboy was looking. Because the glorious had become so familiar that it had lost its splendor. Don't ever let that happen to you with God. Because if God is held high in glory and splendor and honor and wonder, if he is held high with weight in my life, watch this. I'm always deleting. I'm always adding. And that moves me to the center of why he made me. Father, I thank you for the power of your word. I've discovered in my life that the more of the Word I know, the more uncomfortable I get. I'm so far from what you've created me to be. I pray for all of us, including myself, on this day that you would inspire us. You would open our eyes to truth. What's in us that ought not be in us? Where have you been forbidden to be by us? Help us to give you the weight that you deserve, and we pray it through the beauty of the name of your Son that we sang about, Jesus. Amen.
Well, we hope that you guys enjoyed this worship experience today. I know that that word meant a lot to me personally. I want to encourage you to jump on the app or the website and give if you haven't already. And I just want to remind you that we're so grateful and appreciative of your giving and faithfulness during this season. Join us next week as we continue in our second week of this new series, Made for This, and have a happy 4th of July weekend.